three different things essentially that need to be obtained or passed to become an appraiser?
I think good in the marketplace to have multiple options and offerings that are out there. We look forward to addressing those. We talked a little bit about, some of the challenges, why PAREA evolved the way that it did on the last time we were together. But it will allow for anybody who wants to become an appraiser to have a pathway to get that experience logged and not dependent on, do I know somebody already in the profession, a father who's trying to kick the son out of the basement or some connection. It will be basically available to anybody, which, one of the side benefits can be a diverse, or at least a population of appraisers that kind of mirrors the community of that the appraisers come from.
Yeah, it sounds good. So, kind of at the outset, PAREA, practical applications for real estate appraisal, and PAREA is just a acronym for that. Jeff, as you said, and just for clarity, we've got three different things essentially that need to be obtained or passed to become an appraiser. You have the qualifying education, you have the experience, and then you have the national exam. So qualifying education is not PAREA. That is handled through whatever vendors or providers offer that now. The second one is the experience. Previously, the only way to get that experience is through mentorship, meaning you have a supervisor appraiser that has had their license for more than 3 years, who is then willing to register a trainee under their umbrella with the state that they operate in, and then help that person get between 1,000 or 1,500 hours for the lowest, 1,000 for the lowest level license in most states. 1,000 hours of appraisal experience that both the trainee and the supervisor work on. 1,500 if they're looking for the license, the certified residential. And then I think it gets into quite a bit more. I won't know the exact numbers or if they're consistent across each state, but you got a lot of hours there, and you have to, as a trainee, you have to find someone that is willing to mentor you, walk you through those 1,000+ hours of experience. It can be a very hard thing to do, which we covered in extreme depth on our initial episode of why PAREA is there. And then the national exam, once you finish the PAREA curriculum and get your experience, you then have the national exams there. So what PAREA is this alternative pathway to getting that experience.
Yeah, exactly. Addressing the pain point of trying to find somebody that can be a supervisor, for you. It's not shortcutting, in my mind, the process at all. As far as everybody's taking the same amount of education, everybody's passing the same test. But the way that you can get the practical experience and then demonstrate that you are writing, compliant reports. So you mentioned PAREA. I'm glad you talked through what PAREA means or stands for, Mark. We were joking beforehand that I don't know that appraisers are unique in having a lot of acronyms, but between PAREA and USPAP, you can get kind of lost in what the heck are those letters even meaning. But this deals exclusively with the experience portion of becoming an appraiser, as you had just talked through. So, and one of the differences, I think, is that both when working with the trainer and working through this PAREA program, the appraiser is writing appraisal reports. They're analyzing data. They're looking at information that's out there. In PAREA, there is the program that allows you to analyze the market, write a report that complies with our USPAP, our professional standards, and then kind of demonstrate or get that signed off or approved by a mentor. In a traditional model, there's not nearly the structure of how do you write reports, how many reports do you have to write, what parts of the assignment does a trainee work on with a supervisor. It's less structured, but it is a little bit more practical with actual live assignments that you're working on there. But this will allow you to demonstrate. Anybody coming out of PAREA will have written a number of USPAP compliant appraisal reports by the time they're done and get certified.
There is a lot of benefit. We spent some time in the first episode talking about the varied experience that a trainee would get under a mentor, and that could be because the practice that the mentor is engaged in is very narrow. A variety of reasons, but that's a primary one that comes to mind. But what PAREA does is walk you through a wide variety of appraisal problems, intentionally finding appraisal problems and putting them in a curriculum that makes sure you have a very broad understanding of appraisal theory and practice, all completed through individual modules, but ultimately completing appraisal reports, USPAP compliant, USPAP being the kind of rules or guidebook that appraisers follow, USPAP compliant appraisal reports.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's noteworthy that as part of that process, even if you're going through PAREA, you're still accessing the same information, the MLS, the multiple listing service, the data that appraiser is going to have to use. Those in the trainee or in the PAREA model are going to be doing that same process, accessing the same content and information that you would if you were working with a supervisor, in that particular model. But it's been interesting because the appraisal foundation has come out and said, hey, anybody who wants to produce or create a PAREA program, Appraisal Institute notably is the only one that has an active program in the moment. The Appraisal Foundation has said any program that's created, regardless of the provider, has to meet certain things. And it's some of these things you were just talking about, Mark, of being able to write the program or write USPAP compliant appraisal reports. There is still a requirement to have a mentor aspect within the program itself. And right now, our only point of reference is how the Appraisal Institute has chosen to do it. But they've hired full-time mentors that are available to work with every candidate or student or whatever you want to call those that are in the program. So they have interactions with a seasoned and experienced appraiser in going through and writing and doing the different parts of the appraisal reports. But the foundation has put out some pretty clear guidance on what this program has to be, regardless of who's putting it on. And others will come, and we may talk about that here in a minute, but it's not a free-for-all from the education provider's perspective or the program provider's perspective, but the foundation has given some insight as to how that needs to be developed.
It may not be clear to folks that aren't familiar with the industry, or even some in the industry that aren't familiar with the general structure, but the Appraisal Foundation is essentially pushing this concept, trying to address the limitations or the difficulties of folks getting into the business. So they are setting the guidelines for providers of the PAREA education curriculum to meet. So the parameters are set by the Appraisal Foundation. Several are in the process of submitting or working on building some PAREA curriculum that the Appraisal Foundation ultimately approves. As you indicated, Jeff, so far, the Appraisal Institute has the only PAREA curriculum out on the market right now, and has, I think, roughly about 150 students in the program, which is exciting. And I've been involved pretty considerably in the building of that, just in kind of volunteering and helping through the Appraisal Institute, and it's really thrilling to see so many students that are in it so far. 10x that in terms of interest, the 150 students, 10x of that have expressed interest. So it's really, really cool to see that. And I think we are on the verge of having some of our first graduates. That'll be very exciting to talk about once we get closer to it.
Yeah, it really will. They're making progress for sure. And maybe just worth noting that once you go through the program and you get certified or licensed, in fact, as we were talking with a group of ADI candidates, one had asked the question about, is there going to be a stigma if I go through PAREA as opposed to the traditional method? And so far as I can see, a licensed or certified appraiser holds that credential, and there's no designation as to what pathway to get experience they went through to get that. And so obviously there are those that are interested that will be kind of tracking how they perform once they're out or in the in the marketplace working, but I don't see that there's going to be any distinction between those. And I think I would expect that those that come out of this PAREA training will be pretty good at writing a technical appraisal report, know what should be in there to comply with the standards, and I think, be a pretty effective appraiser, at least from that perspective.
Jeff, I think one of the problems one of the problems we addressed pretty thoroughly in our first episode is the lack of incentive for a mentor to bring on a trainee, especially in the residential mortgage space. Lenders, the people that ultimately order appraisals, don't often allow a trainee to participate in a meaningful way. When not a trainee, when a person holds a license, those limitations are totally removed. So you are much more employable for an appraiser, or they're much more able to work with you and build a system or a model that allows them to monetize your services or the value that you're bringing to the table there. So really exciting there. So the Appraisal Institute has 2 modules right now. I don't think that's exactly how the next groups that will come aboard that launch PAREA will have it. But right now, the Appraisal Institute has 2 different modules: a licensed residential, which you take in its entirety, start to finish. And then there is a certified residential that once you finished licensed residential, you can move on to and take. You can stop at the licensed residential. My advice would be that if it's any way possible, you go all the way through the certification process to do both modules. That is the most received license in the marketplace and doesn't limit you on the type of work that you can do. But I know plenty of appraisers that have built beautiful careers with the licensed residential status only.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Mark. For anybody that can, going on to get the certification makes a lot of sense. The foundation does allow a provider to go from the trainee level all the way through certified residential. That's not how the Appraisal Institute has designed it. And having the 2 separate modules or courses that you can do in your entirety, I think makes sense. I think that the way the Appraisal Institute has handled it makes the most sense to me. But as other providers come online, whenever that is, you may have an option to just go all the way to the certified level. But so it'll be fun to see how those play out, to be sure.
You bet. So generally speaking, what you would experience in PAREA, and what I hope we'll do in our coming episodes on PAREA, is talk to students, talk to the mentors, that are mentoring the PAREA students, and give the listener a really good idea of what it's like going through the program. But generally speaking, it is a series of case studies. At least the Appraisal Institute. You might have a condo in Miami. You might have an Atlanta single-family home with external obsolescence or some view problem. And so just moving around the country with local MLSs, appraisal software, and going case study by case study, learning how to appraise and deal with the problems that are presented in each unique case study. I think there's roughly 10 case studies. I think that's roughly each module has something like that. Don't hold me to it. But that is the way the program works. Is you'll do step 1 in your first appraisal report and kind of run through it. You'll submit it to a mentor. They'll come back and provide feedback, and you ultimately will pass or fail that module and kind of have to go back if you didn't pass it. But then if you pass, you move on to the next one and get to the next concept. And so that's kind of the structure of it. It seems to be 100% virtual, which hopefully is very convenient for people to take while are still in the career they're in now, or through, covering their expenses that way. So it's the way that I see it. I think it's pretty fun, and I hope we can provide more color on what it's like to go through the program as we interview students in this podcast.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I think it'll be fun to get some firsthand accounts. We have talked to some students that are in the program, but allowing, having somebody come on and tell us, kind of in the weeds what they're experiencing. But I do like what you pointed out, Mark, that it's a broad range of experience or exposure that you get, different property types, different geographies. It's not designed to make you necessarily competent in the market that you're in, but it's very much designed to help you learn how to get that competence in any market, whether, one you're in now or if you move to a new one or something. And so just seeing property types that you might not otherwise be exposed to, I think gives a good exposure to, some parts of the country have basements, some parts of the country have lots of condos and unique issues that you might not ever even see. But how do I approach and address those kinds of things? I think it can be a more comprehensive training, for that reason, and it's worth, I think, the experience from the different property types and things that you come across in the program. It's designed intentionally that way, I guess, is what I'm saying.
So often, Jeff, we talked about this on the last episode, but this 1 year of experience 20 times over, it's very easy in the appraisal space to kind of do what works or what is available. And what PAREA certainly does is gives you that wide range of experience, which is I'm really excited about, and I think certainly a benefit to training versus the average experience in the traditional path.
You bet. Yeah, absolutely. And you're not kind of beholden to a trainer that does it a certain way, necessarily. You've got some guidance from a mentor, but you've got a broad base of exposure and experiences as you go through the program here. So I think that's exciting. And I think it's probably, worth addressing some of the updates on kind of where it's at as of the time of this recording. It's evolving over time, obviously. As the most up-to-date information that we've got is that there have been 12 concept reviews that have been submitted. Obviously, we've talked about the appraisal institutes, and they that have been approved. They summarize theirs as LR for the licensed residential, and then CR as the certified residential that have been approved by the AQB. They're in practice. They're available to sign up for right now. We'll talk a little bit about kind of how you get vetted to go through the process there, coming up in a minute. But the last information that the foundation put out is that there are 5 other providers that are actively working on their own programs. And it'll be, I think, good in the marketplace to have multiple options and offerings that are out there. We look forward to addressing those as they become available. Right now, the Institutes is the only active one that somebody could actually sign up for and get into right away. A company called Option has announced that they are developing their PAREA program. I don't remember even which call it was on that I heard, Mark, but somebody from the foundation had said there are, of these other 4 or 5 that are active. They're not going to make the announcements on behalf of those that are working on them. They're going to wait until they, the actual companies make the announcement themselves. But we do know that there are at least a handful that are actively developing those. One notable development, and I don't know if you remember the timing or not, Mark, but McKissick, who is a big educator in this space, had been developing, they had announced we're developing a PAREA program. And within the last 30 or 60 days have pulled out, just basically made an announcement saying, hey, we're not continuing our PAREA program. They, had some comments about we're going to continue to support appraisers in the space and provide education, whatever. But one of the big ones that did pull out was just noteworthy to me.
You bet. And Jeff, I'm gonna try to share here. I think I've done this successfully, but generally speaking, this is from the most recent PowerPoint we had from the Appraisal Foundation, which shows the states around the U.S. that have approved PAREA. It isn't approved in every state in the country. I think we are somewhere. I think it is 33 states have approved it. Does that sound right, Jeff?
It does. I'm not fast enough to count up all the light blue dots on the screen that you're sharing, but yeah, it's on that order for sure.
Yeah. So the blue, dark blue are states that have approved it. The light blue are in the rulemaking legislation, so it's coming. I think they are in the process of finalizing that, and then the green states are ones that are still considering it and haven't made that decision, as best I understand. So if you're looking at it and considering PAREA as an option right now, a lot of progress has been made getting this very new and bold pathway to experience credit passed through. You ought to know that. If you happen to be in Wyoming and are thinking about PAREA, probably think again or wait because it isn't ready for it yet. So want to make sure that you guys know that.
That's right. And for anybody not seeing the screen, maybe just listening and wondering what these two idiots are talking about, blue colors on the screen, there are two good sources to go to get an update on whether your state has approved it or not. The Appraisal Foundation has a whole section on their website about PAREA. So too does the Appraisal Institute, and both are actively tracking the status of the individual states and where they're at in the process. So you could certainly look that up at any point if you had questions, or if it, has it changed since the time that we recorded this and with the information that we have here.
You bet. So PAREA has set up the guidelines. We have education providers that are working within those guidelines to build the actual courses that trainees would take to gain their experience. And then ultimately, it is up to those education providers to go to states individually and get approval. And that is not an automatic, as you can see. A lot are still in the process of contemplating or considering it. And we're fortunate to have Jeff on this call because he is part of the state board in Utah that had to make those decisions and contemplate and ultimately approved PAREA as an alternative to getting the education requirement. So really cool, a lot of progress being made, but students are going to come out ultimately as graduates here soon. And I think there's a lot of good that's happening here and a lot of really long-standing problems that PAREA is addressing, no doubt about it. And when you do that, you of course are going to create new problems, and we've got to adjust or address those. And that's going to happen. I think that's the iteration process. What sort of problems that are unanticipated are going to be created by someone getting their experience this way. And that leads me to the last concept that I want to discuss, which is what PAREA isn't. It is not intended to provide geographic competency. You'll be doing a single appraisal in one market 10 times, so 10 different markets around the country, where the traditional model basically got all your work for a year was in one city, under someone that's been practicing in that. So you come out with geographic competency. That is not necessarily how a PAREA graduate will come out. So they will go need to get geographic competency with license in hand. And we see, Jeff and I do see a real need. We work at a large firm, Acurity, and there are several firms like ours that will employ these graduates and be excited to do that. Unfortunately, despite our desire, we can't employ them all. And so there will be a lot of graduates that come out and won't have an employer to work with and get kind of professional competency, how to do live files out in the marketplace. And so we think there's a real need for professional stewardship or guidance with these folks when they come out. How to serve a lender well, how to deal with an agent in the middle of a property who's got a problem with the value or is trying to influence one way or another. These things, kind of real world situations that an appraiser might encounter.
Yep, absolutely, Mark. I'm glad you brought that up. There are just a lot of things that you deal with outside of the technical, how do I analyze, develop, and then report an appraisal report, that all of those things that you referenced and many more that people will have questions about. And frankly, I think topics that we can take on in the future as well as we get together and pontificate a little further, I guess. But hopefully there's some value that comes out of understanding, what PAREA is, why it's come about, and then, where it's going from here. But it's definitely top of mind for a lot of people, and exciting to see where it goes and the output that results from those that go through the process. But it's a pathway to the profession, and I think worth knowing about for sure.
You bet. Well, hopefully this helps some folks understand from a high level what PAREA is, what it's intended to address, what it's like to go through, the program. 150 students in the Appraisal Institute program. I think they have 1,000 folks that have expressed interest. The foundation has indicated that some 3,500 people have expressed interest in PAREA. That is roughly 5% of the entire appraisal population. So there is a bit of a tidal wave. PAREA is here. I don't think it's going anywhere. And so I think all of us ought to learn what it is and learn enough to be able to provide input. And that's kind of what we're hoping to do with this series, discussing PAREA and getting much deeper into many of the topics related to PAREA as we move down. So Jeff, I've enjoyed talking about this, and look forward to our next episodes where we talk to students, stakeholders, mentors, and cover the topic in depth.
I love it, and people may appreciate hearing from somebody other than just us. So we'll get some victims to interrogate.
I can't imagine they would not want that.
You and me both. No, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it, Mark. We'll be
Thanks,
back.
Joe. All right.